hi everyone. Thank you for joining me today on one of our first collabs on YouTube of Wounds Canada. I'm joined here with Matt, a.k.a. FTF Warrior, and we're just gonna have a little chat about diabetes and DFUs and our current situation in COVID. So hi Matt, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about this.
We are
How you doing?
so excited to have you. I am good, thank you. And I can't wait to chat with you and have some of your views on these things, because personally as a diabetic I've learned so much from your channel over the past few years, and so just having you on is quite amazing for our viewers to learn and for me to learn from you and to just have a little discussion about all of it. So I know that your journey with diabetes started quite a while ago, and it was kind of a journey that started one place and ended up in a completely different place. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been type 1 diabetic for just over 10 years now, and the beginning looked a lot different than it did now. When I was diagnosed, my doctor told me a few dark things. He told me essentially I was going to develop diabetic complications. It wasn't a matter of if, it was when. He gave me one insulin, not two, so I had my long-acting but not my short-acting. It was just a mess of a situation. Thankfully I have an amazing endo now, but in the beginning I think I was overwhelmed, which led to me not caring. And I just kind of pretended I didn't have diabetes, as bad as that sounds. I still took my insulin for the most part. That's key. But I didn't test my blood sugars, hardly at all. And I don't know where they were at. If they were high or low, I would feel low occasionally, or I'd feel high, and I'd just give more insulin or give less, kind of guessing. About 4 or 5 years in, I remembered that my doctor had mentioned, hey, about the 10-year marker of bad control, you're gonna get those complications. And I was like, crap, it's been 4 or 5 years. I'm like halfway there already. I should probably start taking care of myself. Like, what if it's too late? What if I've already started developing complications and they're irreversible? And I kind of spiraled for a moment there and realized that if I didn't make that shift that day, I might actually have some complications in my future. He might be right. And so that was the start of when I started testing my blood sugars even once a day. That was a habit that I had to build. And then building into once before meals, and then building into before and after meals, and slowly building my control. It helped a lot to have accountability, I'll tell you that. I texted my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, and I was like, hey, I'm starting to take care of my diabetes a little more. Can you help me? She's like, well, how can I help? We were long distance at the time. I was in New York, she was in California. And I was like, if you could just text me once a day and say, have you tested your blood sugars? And that was kind of the reminder I wanted her to send me. And I think that if I hadn't taken that step and had that realization about 5 years ago, that today my life might look quite different. And I'm very happy to say that I have now crossed the 10-year marker and I don't have any complications. I was able to take care of myself the last 5 years, and I fully intend to take care of myself for the rest of my life. And I think that that alone can change the trajectory of a diabetic's life massively. Just taking a few small steps for better control.
Yeah, absolutely. I have passed the 5-year marker probably, I think it was last year. Now I'm going into 6th year, so I definitely hear you on that halfway mark there, and trying to be more mindful of how, if I am managing better now, then everything in the future might be just a little bit easier and a little bit more manageable, and just to get that ball rolling. And so, as I said earlier, I definitely would watch you a lot and learn from your videos, and learning from the diabetic community online has been huge for me. So what made you want to start your channel?
That's a great question. So I own and run a business called FTF Warrior, which is health and fitness coaching for type 1 diabetics. It didn't always used to be that. So when I first started out, I became a personal trainer and nutritionist because I wanted to help people in general who were struggling with autoimmune diseases. And my wife has Crohn's disease. We were like, let's just go and be like autoimmune trainers, Quickly realized we didn't know a lot about most of the autoimmune diseases, and we couldn't help everyone. So we slowly niched down into the type 1 diabetic space. And before we did that, I went on Instagram, looked up the hashtags for diabetes. I was like, maybe there's a couple accounts here and there. and there were hundreds. I was like, what? This is insane. And keep in mind, this is like 7 or 8 years into my diagnosis. I had no idea there was an online community that was so strong and so big. I was like, this is insane. So it was like, okay, well, first of all, we can help these people because they're everywhere and they're super easy to find. But second, I recognized almost right off the bat that there were key influencers throughout the diabetes space, which, first of all, I've never heard of another chronic condition that has influencers in a space. Like, that was mind-blowing. But just seeing that they're all thriving together, they're bouncing ideas off of each other, and I really wanted to give my 2 cents and be able to help out where I could. And I was like, well, I know fitness and I know nutrition, so I'm going to start my own, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and give what I can and show them what to do. So that's kind of what kickstarted. I just fell into the world of diabetes online and was pleasantly shocked at how massive it was. And then I'm kind of like the awkward kid running into the conversation halfway through, because I tried to jump in and I went online. I figured out how to get everybody's emails, all the top people, and I emailed all of them. A very generic email. Unfortunately, I did it the wrong way. Don't do this, but I emailed them all the same email and was like, I want to make this really cool video and all of you guys should be in it. And they're like, who is this guy? And so I don't know why, but a lot of them responded and they actually participated. And I made a video called We Are Diabetic Warriors. And we split up the script and they all made this amazing piece with me. And it was super cool, but it's just evolved from there. And again, I don't know why they were all so welcoming, but they were. And the community itself is so strong and so connected that, I mean, I don't see how it wouldn't improve anyone living with type 1 diabetes. Improve their management, improve their overall mood and outlook on life. Like, it's just incredible.
Yeah, I remember when I found out about diabetic community a few years into my diagnosis, and I was like, what? This exists? What? Where have I been all these years? And the things that you learn, like, you definitely learn so much from your healthcare providers, but the things that you learn from a person who has diabetes are quite mind-blowing because they go through it every day. And even like such small tips and tricks that you can learn from them on everyday basis are just so helpful with, oh, this person is also doing it and they did this and it helped them and made their day easier. And just doing things like that really helps to feel like, as you were saying, connected, and to feel like, okay, this management, it's not just me in my little diabetes bubble. No, it's it can go way beyond that, and it turns into such a strong community, as you're saying. And one of the things about this community that's really great is because it's online, we can still connect, though everything else is shut down right now. And so do you feel like COVID has kind of hindered your management or the way that you can get your insulin and your supplies, or how has that been an overall experience so far, as like almost 2 months into it now?
I know, 2 months, that's nuts. First of all. I don't think I've ever stayed inside this long. It's been interesting. But no, fantastic question. It's definitely impacted how I manage my diabetes. It's impacted my insulin, like my levels that I give, my basal, my bolus, like everything's changed a little bit. I use exercise to manage my blood sugars quite a bit. I love the gym. And once the gym shut down, I was like, crap, what do I do? And I'll be honest with you guys, for a couple of days, I stopped working out completely, which is ironic and kind of embarrassing because it's like, you're the fitness guy though. And I'm like, I know, but we all struggle.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good because you can share that experience with everyone that, like, even the fitness guy is not really fitnessing right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's really tough to stay motivated at home. Like, I'm at my desk and then I'm just supposed to get up and start doing an intense workout out of nowhere. Like, that's super hard. And when I go to the gym, I use that atmosphere to kind of get me in the mood for exercise. I'm like, okay, everyone here is exercising. I'm ready to exercise. But at home, it's a relaxing place. It's hard to get into that mindset. And it took me a couple days, and I'll be honest, it was my bad blood sugars that finally got me off the couch. And I was like, okay, I remember now. Exercise helps blood sugars a lot. And so I think it was like day 3. where I was like, wow, my blood sugars are high, and then they just drop and go high. It's all over the place.
It's a nice graph.
Yeah, not so fun. So getting back into a routine, I actually got a lot of requests from my coaching clients to make at-home workouts. And I was like, that's a fantastic idea. Plus, I can use those. And so I started putting myself through my own workouts. And since then, blood sugars have been coasting. It's been so much nicer. And, you know, we feel better when we exercise, more energy and all that. So that's helped me stay sane while at home. Just making sure I get at least 30 minutes of exercise a day, you know, for sure. But as far as diabetes management changes, I did have to increase my insulin a little bit. And initially, I almost felt a little bit weird, kind of like I wasn't doing the right thing, because it feels like we shouldn't be taking more insulin. It almost feels like that's a bad report card, but ultimately, take the insulin that you need. Don't ever skimp on insulin. I had to up my basal by like 18%, which I know it's super specific, but I'm data driven. I love analyzing these things. But yeah, had to give more insulin because I'm more sedentary. We're not moving around, going for walks, and so I had to adjust that.
Yeah. And it's good that you mentioned that, because I know that recently also there are a few of my basals and things that we're playing around with, and it's always an increase in certain areas. I'm like, why do we have to increase insulin? Are we supposed to decrease? But I do see that my sugar is better, and I'm like, okay, I need to put myself in the mindset of it's really not about I'm taking X units of insulin and bolus and basal, but just how my management is going and how I'm getting my A1C back in good range, and just continuing on from that on knowing how to maybe decrease insulin in the future. But the goal isn't to like focus on these numbers that can like kind of drive you insane. But at the same time, having said that, mental health plays like a huge role within diabetes. And so as you're saying, we do as diabetics love to take care of our numbers and look at our numbers, and I do love to analyze all my numbers, but at the same time, how do you balance doing that with a mental health, a good mental health, a healthy mental health, at the same time as trying to have good management and struggling with different things like depression or anxiety or diabulimia or things like that. So how do you kind of bring all into one mix and try and have a good solid foundation for management?
100%. And honestly, I think that mental health is overlooked in diabetes management. It's ignored. People don't like talking about it. They feel self-conscious about it. And I say they, but I mean, I've dealt with that in my past as well. When I was first diagnosed, I fell into a depression. A few years ago, I had this severe low in a foreign country, in a small town. It was very scary. And I developed anxiety, and this whole world of mental health became very real to me again. I was like, oh yeah, I need to prioritize this, and it kind of sucks sometimes, right? Where it's, whether it's low anxiety or it's just overall obsession with blood sugars or depression because we have this chronic illness for life, like there's a lot that goes into it. And I think that it's very important to acknowledge that, first of all. It's okay to have bad days. It's okay to be weighed down by the fact that you do have a chronic illness 24/7, 365 days out of the year. You can't get rid of it at this point. Hopefully someday. But there aren't...
yet.
Yeah, not yet. 5 more years, right? No, I'm kidding. There are definitely strategies that we can use, and you know, some of them I've learned from my own experiences. When I was dealing with anxiety, I became proactive and went to anxiety classes that my hospital offered. And you know, they taught us how to do square breathing, how to ground yourself and become aware that you're not dying and it's going to be okay. And there were great strategies with that. But one that I still implement to this day, even if I'm not experiencing any mental health struggles, is gratitude. And waking up in the morning, first thing I do is I think about, what are 3 things that I'm grateful for today, right now? And I think that, and I truly believe that having that gratitude in the morning, first thing when you wake up, puts your mind in a positive state where you start looking for positives throughout your day and you're grateful. And I came across this phrase yesterday, actually. I think it's pronounced pronia, which is the opposite of paranoia. And it's the belief that the universe is conspiring to give you the best life possible. And so instead of focusing on the universe conspiring against you, you think, no, it's conspiring for me. It wants me to have an awesome life. And it's like, whoa, huge flip. Where all of a sudden, if you're in a positive mindset, you can see which things are great that are happening and how amazing life truly is. Yes, I have diabetes, but I'm still able to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm grateful for 1, 2, 3, and all of a sudden, life's not so dark anymore. And so that's a strategy that I've loved using for myself, and it helps kind of bring me out of that darkness.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I definitely agree. I really like that you brought that up with like the concept of giving thanks and being very mindful of, no, there are so many things around me or within my life that I can take hold of and turn my life around through, kind of thing. And I really appreciate that you did take the initiative and go to these anxiety classes and just try and take control of what was going on. And so wherever it may be that can help any one of us to just take control and kind of take a step forward within our mental health management, especially with diabetes, then please, yes, go for it, because it can make kind of all the difference in the world to just manage. Your diabetes management could become much easier when you're in a better mental health state, for sure.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I teach my clients as well is, when diabetes is all out of whack, it's so much easier to fall into this dark place of life. It's so annoying and terrible and it sucks because diabetes is making me feel sick and I can't do what I want to do. But as we control our diabetes, mental health just kind of is an added bonus. Once the blood sugars are cooperating, you get to focus on enjoying life. You get to go do what you want. And so they kind of go hand in hand. As your diabetes management improves, oftentimes, so does your mental status. As it decreases, so does your mental status. And so, yeah, I think that as we're improving, they both kind of take those steps upwards, which is really nice.
Right, exactly. That's very true. So one of the things that we had reached out to you about initially was something called DFUs, and you've said that you had never really heard of that term before. And I haven't either before I worked for Wounds Canada, even though I'm a diabetic. I knew of the concept that you can get your leg amputated because, as your doctor when you got diagnosed told you, and as I got told too, because I had a really interesting diagnosis story, kind of similar to yours, with kind of like a bang, when they tell you, well, yeah, because you're going to develop really bad complications and you're probably going to lose your foot and your sight and your kidneys and every motor function you can probably have. So what did you first think when we asked you if you had any personal experience with DFUs or if you've heard about it?
Yeah, I had to ask you guys, obviously, what a DFU was. I had no idea. Like my doctor had mentioned as well, just like, okay, amputations. And I'm like, that sounds terrible. All right, I'll listen. But DFUs, yeah. I have no personal experience with it. Like I mentioned, I haven't had any complications, so I'm very grateful for. And I've heard the horror stories, and I've told people, family gatherings, whatever it is, yes, I have type 1 diabetes. And they're like, oh, my grandma lost her leg to diabetes. And I'm like, that's not what I wanted to hear. You know what I mean?
Thanks for that one. Great.
Yeah. But I'm actually curious, have you had any experience with DFUs at all?
Not to that extent, but I know that I was traveling a couple years back and my toe started really hurting, and it turns out to be like I banged my foot and it was an ingrown toenail, and so it got infected. And so I was traveling and I didn't know, I just thought it was hurting, and it just looked really red one day. And so I played around with it. It like pus came out. It was just crazy, but I knew the fear that I felt was so real that this is gonna get infected, but by the time I get home and I'm gonna lose my leg. Like, that's all I can think about. It went from like something that can be easily drained, oh, I have an infection in my toe, for a normal person or a person without diabetes, to I'm gonna lose my foot because I just have this really minor infection. And so the fear of it played so deeply in my mind, and I was trying to drain it. I was kind of like in survival mode. And I didn't know how much, like I didn't know if it's all gone or whatever. And then when I came back to Canada, I went to my doctor and he tried to like reopen it and drain it, which was a really horrible experience, to say the least. And thank God it's all good now. I had to take care of it, and for at least 2 weeks I was putting like 2 different types of creams and I think I was trying to take antibiotics to make everything kind of normal and stable, and I was taking care of my blood sugar immensely more. And so it never really escalated to that point, but definitely coming into the mental state of, oh my goodness, something as small as a cut in my foot that got infected can lead to God knows what. But at the same time, one of the amazing things about learning from Wounds Canada is that we had a diabetes awareness day in November, and there's a woman who came and spoke about her husband's his experience with DFUs, and how everything with diabetes is really, really manageable and preventable, especially when you have people that care and when you care. And so this gentleman had a really bad foot ulcer, really, really bad, and they told him, you have to get it amputated. And obviously that really terrified him, and he was older, and so this is kind of the mindset where you're type 2 and you're a little bit older, okay, and you have a foot ulcer, you're probably gonna have to get an amputation. And he said, no, I don't want to get an amputation, I'm gonna take care of it. And she was saying breathing, eating, everything after that became just about management and trying to save his foot. And because they had a good team with wound care, and she was by his side the whole time, they were able to reverse what was going on with his foot. And she said when he actually died years later, he had all his 10 fingers and toes, which is quite a great testimony to how much prevention itself is quite key when it comes to our diabetes management, even when we start from like a younger age, even when you're type 1, because a lot of times you think, okay, with type 2, that's where you're gonna find amputation, but it's really all about management, right? And if you don't start today, and if you don't start this like snowball effect rolling, what can say that in 15 years all of a sudden it's gonna magically change? No, you want to start at the point where you're at now, whether you're a year down having a diagnosis, 10 years down, 15 years down, but just like by starting today, that I take initiative of this lifetime partner essentially, then things can start taking a turn for the best. And so we sent you a few of our stats that we've had from our researches, that we found through research, and I'm just gonna read a few and let me know kind of your reaction to it. So after a lower limb amputation, not only do people suffer the clinical and mental consequences of limb loss, but also have 5-year mortality rate of 50%.
Yeah, I thought that one was really interesting, and I put myself in their shoes, so to speak, and I was like, yeah, if I lost a limb, my entire quality of life just changed. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that stat's directly related to sepsis or other infections causing more issues, or if it's just a mindset thing of feeling they're giving up, and not wanting to live because they feel like they can't live a full life. But I imagine both of those play a role in that statistic. But the mental health alone, having to go through an amputation, that is severe. That is literally life altering. And yeah, I mean, I was shocked, but it also makes sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And also, did you know that the mortality rate itself is higher than that in breast cancer and prostate cancer or lymphoma? Which is kind of mind-blowing to me, that kind of diabetes can alter your life in such a way if you don't take care of it early on.
Right.
Yeah, and the impact that it has on quality of life, as you're saying, it can be like really devastating for both families and the patients themselves. But one of the things that our campaign is really trying to do is to really hammer this point home that prevention is key, because actually 4 out of 5 amputations, so 80% of amputations related to diabetes, are preventable, which is kind of mind-blowing that you can get such a huge number of people that can suffer something so traumatic to actually have a really good quality of life. And so our campaign hashtags have been hashtag end amputations and hashtag save the 4, because it's 4 out of 5. So it's just to bring awareness to the fact that this is not a death sentence kind of thing. It's not a death sentence, but at the end of the day, things can be changed and things can be prevented and things can be take a turn for the better.
I had to ask you guys what Save the Four was because I was confused.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
who's the four?
Who's the
Uh,
four people?
yeah, it totally makes sense though.
Yeah.
I think the first time I read that, I read it as like, or I imagined 4 out of 5 fingers. I'm like, oh, but no, it's not that at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. 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 You can just have four of the fingers. No, you can actually save 80% of the people.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
mind blowing. I think you made a great point, which, prevention is key.
Hmm.
It sounds like there's really two main factors that go into this. One is wound care in the first place, and second is diabetes management. If you're able to control your blood sugars, keep your A1C on the lower side, you have less risk of developing further complications down the road, especially with wounds. Is that right?
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And with most complications, but especially with wounds, because wounds is the visible thing. A lot of times you don't realize that you don't have great kidney function or that your eyesight is deteriorating because you can always change your prescription or things like that to kind of make it better. But when you're in pain, um, and also when you're losing feeling in your feet. And so we experience a lot of tingling in our limbs as diabetics, especially when your sugar is spiking. But after a while, if you start losing sensation altogether, that's where the danger really comes in, because you want to be able to realize there is a nail in my shoe that I need to take out, kind of thing. And so, yeah, absolutely, for sure, with wounds especially, that it's really really important to um, take that head on, and with all the different diseases, because a lot of times you actually can't feel it, and you wouldn't know until it's too late.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
scary thought, isn't it? Where you might be deteriorating and going down a path of no return and not even know it because you can't
Yeah.
feel. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure scary. So, from your perspective, what is something that people can do if they can't feel to, be careful with that? Is it just a matter of checking your feet more often, or are there
Yes.
extra steps?
So checking your feet is key to life for when it comes to having diabetes. And so whoever you are, whatever stage you're in your diabetes, whether you're type 1, type 2, 4 years old, 40 years old, checking your feet is really really crucial. Whether you do that through a mirror that you put down because you're not able to lift your foot, or you're just checking your feet every day, it's really really important, because unless you do that, you wouldn't know that you're not feeling something because you can't feel it. Also, taking care of your feet on a daily basis, washing and cutting your toenails, and trying to keep things moisturized, because also as people with diabetes, we often lose moisture and we need to keep things moisturized, because other than that, you'll have cracks in your feet where, if that keeps going, again, you can get a cut or an infection through that. Also, some of the things that we do recommend is that you don't soak your feet, and to just keep everything as dry as possible. So after you've washed and moisturized and everything, just make sure that everything is dry and it's not left for any kind of fungus to set in. So things like that, but definitely check your feet, check your feet, check your feet every day, just like you're checking your blood sugar, but this you only have to do once a day. And I find this to be like the fun part of diabetes. Like, it's more normal, quote unquote, because it's not something that, oh, I'm checking my sugar, I'm doing something, but I'm just like looking at my feet. And it becomes something so natural when you do it. You just have to get in the habit of doing it. And again, even if you're not able to lift your foot, you can just put a mirror and check it like that. Um, because a lot of people are not able to do that, and some people with diabetes live alone. And so that's definitely another option. So it's doable, and that's where management is key. Prevention is key, comes in, because just something as simple as looking at your feet. If you have a very small cut and you weren't able to feel it, then now you know that, wow, I wasn't able to feel that, when you've seen it.
Yeah. So, what is the next step when they do find something like a small cut? Is it go to your doctor right away, or is it look at it and keep an eye on it for a day or two? What's like the proper next step for that?
So definitely going to your doctor is definitely very important, because especially with diabetes, things can progress fairly quickly, and the process of healing takes a bit longer. And so you don't want to end up being at a spot where you left it for a day or two. And for a person without diabetes, that would be normal to kind of wait out on it a bit. But for us, the process itself of reversing a cut or a wound or anything like that can take a little bit longer and infection can set in. And so you definitely want to go to your doctor as soon as possible, and through that kind of switch things around as fast as possible, even if it wasn't something generally huge, but because of the different possibilities of things that can go wrong with diabetes, then you definitely want to have that the precautionary measure of why not just go and get it checked out. So for sure, I would say that, especially for me, from my own experience, when I thought it was okay, and I'm like, it's fine, it's just getting redder and redder every day. So I couldn't even see my wound, right? It was just painful. I couldn't actually see it, but it was actually infected. Yeah, definitely, if you can go see your doctor, go see your doctor for sure.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to take that first step, especially because then it takes the pressure off of you. Like,
Yeah.
hey, what do you think I should do, Doc?
Yeah, for sure. Like, here you go. You can deal with it now, kind of thing. So, on that note, what advice would you give to other people with diabetes, so that they can make like a big impact on their lives, when it comes to prevention, and how diabetes itself already has an impact on your life, so how you can switch that around, sort of thing?
But yeah, as we increase time in range or even lower our A1C, they're relatively similar. That's going to help improve overall health, quality of life. Like I said in the beginning, if I can improve time in range, that's less of a mental stressor for me, because then my blood sugars are doing what they're supposed to do. And so that's always my first step. But, exercise is a great way to improve blood sugars. Even going for a walk or a hike, it doesn't have to be going to the gym, right? I like the gym. Most people don't. So if you want to go for a swim or for a hike or play with your kids on the playground, like, it's all movement. That's all a fantastic way of incorporating that. Yeah, get moving. That's the biggest part of that. And like Marina is telling us, check your feet, check your whole body. It's good just to kind of have a look around, check yourself out, right?
Overall fan.
Oh man, but yeah, as we improve diabetes management, that's going to obviously make life a bit easier. But the next step, as we kind of discussed earlier, is find your community. Find people that get you. Find people that you can borrow some tips and tricks from. At the very least, somebody you can talk to about your successes and your struggles, right?
Yeah.
And if you can't find anyone that lives with diabetes, first of all, the online community is indispensable. Instagram, there's blogs everywhere, YouTube, all those places are great. But let's say for some reason your internet's down, you can't find anyone online. Go find a family member that you can just have an honest conversation with. Someone that's going to listen to you. It's a lot better if they do have type 1 diabetes or type 2, whichever one you have, because then they can kind of commiserate and share in your victories. But having some form of community is going to make a massive difference in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier how when you were first diagnosed, because of kind of the way you were diagnosed, you didn't really take it into your stride, because you're like, well, if it's gonna be, it's gonna be, kind of thing. So, and I know when I was first diagnosed, I kind of had the opposite response, sort of thing, but it turned into that later on, because at first I did have a very shocking way of being diagnosed, and I was like, okay, I'll just take it in my stride. I just want to move on with my life. That was my mental state. It wasn't that I wanted to have good blood sugars per se. I did, but the whole point for me was like, as long as I can do things normally, that's all I care about, which is definitely huge. But also to realize that this is not going anywhere anytime soon. So, what advice would you give somebody who was just diagnosed and they're having a hard time coming to terms with the disease, or even if at first they were taking it into their stride, after a while it becomes a heavier and heavier burden?
It's a great question. I think that it still falls on find your community, as far as if you see other people living their life with type 1 diabetes. Like, for me, that was a huge indicator that I could have a normal life. Finding out that there were Olympians that had type 1, I was like, whoa, you can do that still? Like, you know what I mean? And, there's movie stars. We got Nick Jonas. He's a type 1 diabetic. So seeing people across the world still follow their dreams, it was an incredible realization for me. Like, oh, I can still do what I want. Like, there's maybe one or two careers overall that we can't do, but the rest of them are fair game. Just try and take control of your diabetes. You know, for a good amount of time, I wanted to be a firefighter. And I went through the trainings, I went through the physical and mental testing, all this great stuff. And I'm still in certified EMT. And all of those processes were me kind of proving to myself that I can keep up. I can do this, you know? And the only caveat was you had to have your diabetes well enough controlled so that you didn't need assistance for a low blood sugar more than twice a year. And I'm like, okay, that means assistance meaning an ambulance was called, or like someone had to give you glucagon. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can still pretty much do whatever I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah, seeing your video about that, I was really surprised because recently, for some reason, that idea came to mind of can a diabetic become a firefighter or a paramedic? And I remember actually asking Beyond Type 1 and I got like a really nicely overwhelming response. And then a couple of days later, I found your video. I wasn't actually looking for it. Like I wasn't looking, can a Type 1 diabetic become a firefighter? It just like kind of came into my mind. And I saw your video and I was like, no way, I should have just watched Matt's video and I would have gotten my answer kind of thing. But yeah, that's quite amazing because yeah, you can just do it if, and seeing how like, management itself is kind of like a stepping stool to reaching what you're trying to aim for kind of thing, and it's not necessarily in the way, but it's kind of a build up to, okay, if I want to get to this, then that's something I'm gonna have to work with.
Exactly. It's an extra step. That's all it is. You still you're gonna get up the step ladder. It's just one extra rung that you have to climb. Control your diabetes, chase your dreams. You have the choice, you know, to do whatever you want. It's just a matter of figuring out how you can stay healthy while pursuing those dreams.
Exactly. And it goes hand in hand.
So did you have, kind of in closing, any questions that you would like to ask us?
I think that I would like to ask how people can get a hold of you guys, find your statistics, your information. I know that I've learned a lot just from our conversations about DFUs. DFU in general. I didn't know what that was. So for anybody listening or watching, how can they find more information on what you guys have to offer?
Yes, so we have an overwhelming amount of resources on our website. It's called woundscanada.ca. And we're going to put all the links in the description, but you can also find us on all social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. We're going to try and put everything in the description box, but we have truly an overwhelming amount of resources, both for clinicians and for patients. And we also have an institute with different training courses for people to understand how to deal with all sorts of wounds, whether it's diabetes wounds or burn wounds and different things like that. But yes, definitely come over and check out our website because we have a lot of things and we love to receive emails and kind of respond back with and correspond with that, and just have kind of a general community of how to go about managing your diabetes, as well as you were saying, like with an online community. And so kind of just join the conversation with us and for better management and for prevention. So that's definitely what I would say. Please come over and visit us and see what we do. So having said that, it was super nice to have you. Thank you so much for doing this interview with us and doing your video. If you guys want to see Matt's video, go check it out on his channel. We'll also put a link to it, and he definitely talked about so many important points and touched on his story as well. So if you want to hear more about that, go over to his channel. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, Matt, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Marina, for having me on. It was a blast having this chat with you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, see you guys.
Bye.